We have Fox team coverage on this busy weekend in Washington. Madeline Rivera is at the White House where President Trump is following the action on the bill. But let's begin with senior congressional correspondent Chad Pergram. He's live on Capitol Hill. So set the stage for us, Chad. What's going on right now?
John, good afternoon. Well, Thom Tillis did not always align with President Trump. His retirement announcement triggered a shockwave on Capitol Hill. Tillis was one of two Republicans who voted against starting debate on the bill last night. President Trump lit up Tillis. He said Tillis was making a, quote, big mistake opposing the bill. He then threatened to primary Tillis. Tillis worried about health care provisions in the bill. Democrats boomeranged his opposition against the GOP.
The big and not very beautiful bill that we are about to vote on here in the Senate is going to cut $900 billion out of Medicaid. Don't believe me? Listen to Senator Thom Tillis. He's been saying loudly, this bill is a bad deal for the middle class. It'll raise health care costs and throw millions off of needed health care.
Tillis won his two previous races by about 2 percentage points. Tillis also had reservations until the last minute about supporting Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense. But even other Republicans from North Carolina see the bill differently from Tillis. Greg Murphy is a doctor.
The last thing as a physician I want to do is hurt a system that is already hurting as it is. But I also want to get back to the fact that there really are some things within the system as it is right now that are ridiculous and need to go away.
Democrats believe they can weaponize the big, beautiful bill against vulnerable Republicans.
What this does, and the baseline is all these cuts, all this cutback on health care to provide the wealthiest in our country a disproportionate share of tax cuts. That just doesn't seem fair. And the more we can get that out, I think this will be a political albatross.
Now, this means Tillis likely opposes the big, beautiful bill. GOP Kentucky Senator Rand Paul also voted nay last night. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer compelled Senate clerks to read the entire 940-page bill out loud. That's gone on since 11 p.m. last night. Their voices are wavering.
In fiscal year 2026,
they are out of this. They're out off
$66 million to be derived from all contributions.
Just follow my lead, okay?
And to remain available until the end of fiscal year 2035 for the Director of Office to carry out subsections C through F.
Now, just as we were listening to that soundbite of the clerk, John Thune, the majority leader, I should say, has taken the floor. They have ended reading this bill. Again, they were at it since 11:08 last night. And so this is the first time we've heard anybody on the Senate floor other than one of the Senate reading clerks going through that 940-page bill. This is Bernie Moreno, the Republican senator from Ohio, in the chair right now. So what we should have starting here very soon, John, is actual debate on the bill. Under the rules, there are up to 20 hours of debate. Now, we don't think that they will consume all of that. The Democrats will probably consume their 10 hours. It's split to 50-50. Republicans do want to talk for a little bit here, so we probably imagine, a few hours there, maybe 3 or 4, and then they start this lengthy vote series, which could alter the bill. That's what they call a vote-a-rama. That's where they take roll call vote after roll call vote after roll call vote. Now, again, there are amendments there that could change the bill, and that worries some House conservatives. But earlier this afternoon, I was texting back and forth with the Ways and Means Committee Chairman Jason Smith, and he tells Fox that about 85% of the tax provisions in the bill are the same as the House bill. So the Senate hopes to pass the bill Monday. The House could move later this week. So they're going to go through this debate that's starting right now. And then, that probably gets us into the overnight hours. And then they go to the vote-a-rama, the marathon voting session. John, what we've seen on these marathon voting sessions when we've had other so-called budget reconciliation bills on the floor, that's what this is they usually run between about 9 hours and 15 hours. So let's just do the time here. So let's say they take about 12 hours of debate. Okay, that gets us to a little bit after 1 in the morning. Then we're looking at this vote-a-rama, maybe starting 1 o'clock or so in the morning, maybe a little bit later. It's always a little bit later in the Senate because of what we call entry and booking time up here. It's kind of like soccer. So maybe at the earliest they could get to a roll call vote on final passage would be maybe 10 to 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. Worst case scenario, maybe 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And that presumes, of course, that they have the votes. We talked about Senator Tillis. We talked about Rand Paul. You had Ron Johnson, the Republican senator from Wisconsin last night, who was a no on the board and then flipped his vote to yes after a lengthy conversation with Vice President Vance and also, with John Thune, the majority leader in his office. So they need Ron Johnson here. They can go down to 50 votes. As I always say, it's about the math. If it's 50-50, they can still have Vice President Vance break that tie and still pass the bill. But that is up in the air a little bit right now. We tend to think that they have this wrapped up, but you just don't know until the very end, especially because of Tom Tillis signaling that he was going to be a hard no and he's, going to retire at the end of his term. And that's to say nothing of the House. And that's why there's some concern there by these House conservatives about how the bill may have changed. Now, I pointed out what Jason Smith, the Ways and Means Committee chairman from Missouri, said earlier today, that there's not really that many changes. But that said, there are conservatives in the House who think this bill is different than what they passed on May 22nd. And they're very worried about, having this come back and the Senate essentially jamming them. I know some of the people in the leadership on the Republican side of the aisle in the House don't like that, but that is the reality with those rank and file members, especially on the conservative side of the aisle, the Chip Roys and some others. Back to you.
It's my understanding, Chad, that the Senate version of the bill is projected, at least, to increase the deficit. Do I have that right?
Yeah, there's a debt ceiling increase in this that's much bigger, about $5 trillion. It's a lot higher than the House debt ceiling increase. We believe that they will hit the debt ceiling in early August. The Congressional Budget Office, just in the past 2 weeks, has put that back a little bit, about mid-August to maybe September. You don't really know until you get close. So that's really the deadline. If for some reason they can't pass this by the 4th of July, they need to pass this by then, because that's the debt ceiling deadline.
I want to put up on the screen some of the key features of the bill that the Senate is voting on. One of them is new restrictions on Medicaid qualifications. Can you get into that a little bit? Because that seems to be angering a lot of Democrats.
Yeah, that's probably the most important thing, besides the renewing the 2017 tax cuts to Republicans, where they say, OK, if you are an able-bodied person between about 18 and age 60, you need to go to work, 80 hours over the course of a month. You can also volunteer. You can also get some sort of, professional training or school. That would count toward that. But in order to qualify for those benefits, you need to go to work. And they're really hammering that. And one of the things I would watch in that vote-a-rama that's going to come up here is that there could be some roll call votes that Republicans engineer to weaponize against vulnerable Democrats who are up in 2026 and say, can you believe that they voted against this? And then when you get to late October next year, just before the midterm elections, they will turn those roll call votes that they engineer in the overnight tonight against those vulnerable Democrats and say, can you believe they voted against this, or they voted for that, or whatever it might be. Really what these vote-a-ramas are, this is really the first shot that's sometimes fired in the next election, because they try to design some of these roll call votes as a wedge against folks who represent a swing state.
We're going to take another look at some of the items that are in the Senate bill. Increasing the deficit, you talked about. The deficit goes up by about $3.3 trillion over the next 10 years. Now, a lot of House hawks are not going to like that. There's a $2,200 tax credit with proof of a Social Security number from one parent. And then there are deduction caps for taxes on overtime and tips. Then you go to the House side. The House version increases the deficit by about $2.5 trillion over the next 10 years. $2,500 tax credit with proof of Social Security number from both parents, and no deduction caps for taxes on overtime and tips. Which of those is going to be the most problematic for the House to resolve after it comes out of the Senate, do you think, Chad?
Well, the question is, does the House want to accept the Senate package? I mean, they were only able to pass their bill with one vote on May 22nd. And just the idea that whatever comes out of the Senate, unless they want this to go on for a much longer period of time and they play what we call parliamentary ping pong where they bounce different versions of it back and forth, and eventually, one side or the other wins, meaning the House or the Senate. They certainly won't get that done by the 4th of July, if that's the case. Yeah, Nicole Malliotakis, who's a Republican from New York, indicated that maybe they could go to a conference committee. That's where you take a House bill and a Senate bill, and you get into a congressional blender, and you merge the bills, and then you produce what's called a conference report. It's basically a new bill. You send them both back to the House and Senate, and they have to adopt that revised, blended version.
But the president says he wants to sign something into law by the 4th of July, so it doesn't sound like that would please him, although I guess there is no hard and fast deadline here, right?
Well, he kind of said two different things on Friday. Publicly, there was an event where he was speaking Friday, and he said, it's not the end of the world if we're not done on the 4th. And then, just a couple of hours later on Truth Social, he put out another statement saying, imploring the House of Representatives to get this done. This is where some Republicans, frankly, when you talk to them off the record, they say, the main thing we want to do is get this done and get it done right. Cross the T's, dot the I's.
All right, Chad Pergram, our chief congressional correspondent, having a busy weekend. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.